The unexpected encounter. Jason was walking home from work, the cold evening air brushing against his face. The streets of New York were busy as usual, but tonight something felt different. He couldn't explain it, but the energy in the air was heavier, almost electric. He had just crossed the street when a sudden, sharp flash of light pierced the night sky. Jason stopped, squinting up at the glowing streak that cut through the darkness. The light was so bright that it made the stars seem dim. For a moment, he thought it might be a shooting star, but it wasn't falling, it was coming down. The ground beneath his feet trembled slightly. He took a step back, his heart racing. What was happening? The city around him seemed to fall silent, the usual noise of traffic and chatter fading away. It was as if the world itself was holding its breath. The light grew brighter, and before Jason could react, something massive appeared above him, blocking out the stars. A sleek, dark ship hovered in the sky. Its edges shimmered with a strange energy, and it seemed to defy gravity, hovering there as if it belonged. Jason's breath caught in his throat. He couldn't take his eyes off the ship. It was unlike anything he had ever seen. For a moment, everything was still. Then, with a low hum, the ship began to descend slowly, landing in the middle of the street. Jason was too stunned to move. His feet felt like they were glued to the ground, his eyes fixed on the ship. The world around him seemed to blur, and he could hear his heart pounding in his ears. The hatch of the ship opened with a hiss, and a figure stepped out. Jason's breath hitched. The figure was a woman, but not like any woman he had ever seen. She was tall, almost too tall, with long silver hair that seemed to glow in the dim light. Her skin was a deep shade of purple, almost like a rich royal velvet. Her eyes were the most striking feature, glowing faintly with a soft blue light. They locked onto him instantly, and for a moment, Jason felt like she could see right through him. The woman stepped down from the ship, her boots clicking softly against the ground. Her movements were graceful, yet powerful, like she was gliding across the air rather than walking. She wore a tight-fitting suit of some kind, dark and metallic, that shimmered as she moved. It was as though she was from another world, because she was. Jason felt his legs finally move, taking an instinctive step back. His mouth was dry, and he couldn't think straight. This wasn't real. This couldn't be happening. But there she was, standing right in front of me. She stopped a few feet away from him, looking down at him with a raised eyebrow. For a moment, Jason didn't know what to say, or even how to react. His mind raced as he tried to comprehend the situation. Was this a dream? Was I hallucinating? The woman spoke, and her voice was soft and commanding, like a melody with an edge of power. "You, human," she said, her gaze never leaving his face. "Why do you keep looking at me?" Jason's heart skipped a beat. The words hit him like a splash of cold water. He stammered. His eyes were still locked onto her, drawn to her presence, to her beauty, to the strange aura that surrounded her. It was as though she was calling to him, even though he knew she was from another world. For a moment, he couldn't speak. His mind couldn't process it. Then, without thinking, the words tumbled out of his mouth. "Because your ass is very nice," he said, his voice shaking. There was a long pause, and Jason's face turned bright red. He couldn't believe what he had just said. Why had he said that? He wanted to take it back, but the words had already left his mouth. The woman stared at him, her eyes narrowing slightly. Jason braced himself for an angry response, but instead, her lips curled into a faint smile. The look in her eyes was no longer one of anger or confusion. It was something else. Intrigue. Amusement. She stepped closer, closing the distance between them. Jason's breath caught in his throat as she towered over him, her presence overwhelming. She didn't speak at first, just studied him, as if trying to figure him out. Finally, she spoke again, her voice softer this time, but still filled with authority. "You are not like the others, human," she said, her tone now filled with curiosity. "Most humans would fear me. Yet you stand here without hesitation. Why?" Jason swallowed hard. His heart was still racing, but he stood his ground. There was something about her, something he couldn't explain. She wasn't just an alien, she was something more. He could feel it deep in his bones. "I don't know," he said, his voice steady, despite his fear. "I guess I'm just not scared of you." The woman's eyes flickered with something unreadable. She tilted her head slightly, studying him with renewed interest. "You are strange, human," she said. "Perhaps I will learn more about you." Jason had no idea what was going on, but he knew one thing for sure. This was only the beginning. The challenge. Jason stood there, staring up at the alien princess, unsure of what to do next. The way she looked at him made him feel both small and important, like he was under a microscope, being studied by someone who could destroy him with a mere thought. Yet, despite the fear gnawing at him, he couldn't look away. She stood tall, her silver hair glowing softly in the dim light of the street. Her expression had shifted from curiosity to something else, something darker. She was assessing him, and Jason didn't know whether he was about to be crushed under the weight of her judgment or offered some kind of strange reward. "You are different," she repeated, as though speaking to herself. "Most humans would flee, but you remain. There is something about you." Jason swallowed hard. His heart was still racing, but he stood his ground. "I told you I'm not afraid of you," he said, trying to sound more confident than he felt. The words felt hollow in his own ears, but he pushed through. "And I don't know why. I guess I'm not like everyone else." The princess's eyes gleamed. "No," she said slowly, almost as if savoring the moment. "You're not." She took another step closer, her boots making a soft click with each stride. Jason's heart began to race, not from fear, but from something else. There was a magnetic pull to her, an allure that was impossible to ignore. "Do you know who I am, human?" she asked, her voice suddenly colder, more commanding. Jason blinked, stunned. The Arkan Empire? He'd never heard of it, but that didn't mean much. The way she said it, though, sounded like she was the ruler of something far beyond Earth. His mind raced. What did this have to do with him? Why was she standing here, in front of me, speaking like they were equals? "You are different," she continued, narrowing her eyes at him. "I've never met a human like you before." Jason found his voice again, a mix of confusion and stubborn curiosity driving him forward. "I'm just trying to figure this out. I don't know what you want from me." Her lips curled into a smile, though it was more like a challenge than a friendly gesture. "I'm not here for your compliance, human. I'm here for a test." "A test?" repeated Jason, heart beating faster. "What kind of test?" The princess stepped back, her expression becoming unreadable. "I've observed your species for some time. You humans are unpredictable, chaotic, and often reckless. You've made your mark on the galaxy, but I'm curious to see if there is more to you than that. I am giving you an opportunity, human." Jason raised an eyebrow. "An opportunity? What kind of opportunity?" She gestured to the ship behind her, its dark, sleek frame shimmering under the lights. "I want you to prove that you are worthy of something more. If you can survive what I throw at you, if you can show me your true strength, then I will grant you a gift. Something beyond your wildest dreams." Jason felt his stomach tighten. He wasn't sure what kind of game this alien princess was playing, but it was clear she was serious. The stakes were high, and he could sense that this moment, this encounter, was about to change everything. "Do you accept the challenge?" she asked, her voice almost teasing, but with an unmistakable undertone of danger. Jason's mind whirled. Part of him wanted to run, to get as far away from her as possible. Another part of him was intrigued, curious about what she meant by something beyond his wildest dreams. And yet another part of him was drawn to her, to the power she exuded, the mystery surrounding her. He took a deep breath.
"I accept," he said, his voice steady despite the storm of thoughts in his head. The princess's eyes lit up with something like approval. "Very well," she said. "Prepare yourself, human. The test begins now." Before Jason could react, a sudden gust of wind swept through the street, and the world around him began to change. The streetlights flickered and dimmed, the ground shifting beneath his feet. It was like the world itself was warping around him. The princess's voice cut through the chaos. "This is your chance, human. Show me what you are truly capable of." Jason didn't have time to think. He just ran.
The test begins. Jason ran, not sure why he was running, but instinct told him to move. His legs carried him faster than he had ever run before, his heart pounding in his chest like a drumbeat. The air felt thick and charged, as if every molecule around him was alive, pulsing with some unseen energy. He could barely see, the world around him warping as though it was bending to the will of the alien princess. He had only dealt a few steps when the ground beneath him cracked open, a deep rift splitting the pavement like a giant chasm. Jason stumbled, barely managing to regain his balance before the fissure widened even further, sending a shockwave of energy through the air. The princess's voice echoed, calm yet powerful, cutting through the chaos. "This is only the beginning, human. You must learn to adapt if you are to survive." Jason looked around, trying to make sense of his surroundings. The street, once familiar, had transformed into something alien. The buildings were no longer just steel and glass. Now they loomed like towering monoliths of strange glowing material, their surfaces shifting in color, like living organisms. The sky above had turned a deep shade of purple, swirling with patterns that didn't belong to Earth. He took a step forward, his pulse racing. Where was the princess? He turned back, but she was nowhere to be seen. For a moment he wondered if she had just vanished, but then he heard the sound of her voice again. This time it was everywhere, surrounding him. "Survival," she said, the word like a whisper in his mind. "This is the first part of your test. You will face obstacles, ones you've never imagined, and only through your choices will you prove yourself worthy of the reward." Jason's breath quickened. "What do you want from me?" he called out, his voice shaking. "What is this test?" The answer came not in words, but in the form of a sudden crash. The ground beneath him cracked again, but this time it wasn't a crack. It was a deep, rumbling growl that vibrated through his entire body. Jason spun around, and to his horror, a massive creature emerged from the shadows, a beast the size of a small building, its body covered in dark, leathery scales. Its eyes glowed a faint red, and its teeth were sharp, gleaming like knives. The creature snarled, a low, guttural sound that seemed to shake the very air. Jason took a step back, his body frozen in fear. He had no idea how to fight something like this. His hands trembled, and his legs felt like jelly. But he couldn't just stand there. He had to do something. A surge of adrenaline coursed through his veins. He wasn't sure what was happening, but he knew one thing. If he didn't act, he was going to die. He looked around desperately for anything that could help him. His eyes locked onto a nearby broken piece of metal from the damaged street. It was sharp, jagged, a weapon of sorts. Without thinking, he grabbed the piece of metal and raised it in front of him, trying to steady his hands. The creature snarled again, its massive body shifting as it lunged toward him with terrifying speed. Jason didn't have time to think. He dove to the side, narrowly avoiding the creature's crushing claws. The beast roared in frustration, spinning around to face him. Jason scrambled to his feet, his heart pounding in his chest. He wasn't fast enough. He could feel the heat of the creature's breath on his skin as it lunged again. But this time, Jason didn't run. He stood his ground, raising the shard of metal high. As the creature's massive jaws snapped towards him, he plunged the metal into the side of its head, feeling it sink deep into the creature's skull. It let out a horrible screech, thrashing wildly, but Jason held on, twisting the metal until the creature collapsed to the ground with a thud, lifeless. Jason stood there, breathing heavily, staring at the fallen beast, his hands covered in its dark, sticky blood, and his heart was still racing. He had done it. He had killed the creature, survived the first test. But something inside him told him this was far from over. The princess's voice echoed again, cold and emotionless. "Well done, human. You have survived the first challenge, but this is only the beginning. You will face more trials, each one harder than the last. Do not think that your victory here means you are safe." Jason wiped his hands on his pants, still trying to process what had just happened. The creature had been terrifying, but he had fought back. For the first time, he realized that he might actually have a chance at this. But the question still hung in the air. What did the princess want from him? Why was she testing him like this? And what was this reward she had promised? Before he could think further, the ground beneath him began to tremble again. Jason looked up, expecting more danger, but this time, the world around him started to shift once more. The strange, glowing buildings faded away, and he found himself back on the street. His street, where everything had started. But something was different now. The world felt heavier, as though the weight of the challenge had settled onto his shoulders. He wasn't just in a test anymore. This was real. And he knew, deep down, that if he was going to survive this, he would have to change. The princess's voice echoed one last time, filling the air with a promise. "This is your chance, human. But remember, only the strongest survive. Only the worthy deserve my gift." Jason took a deep breath, his resolve hardening. He wasn't sure what was coming next, but he was ready. The hidden truth. Jason stood still, panting heavily, his body still shaking from the fight. The creature's lifeless form lay sprawled on the ground in front of him, its red eyes dimming as the life drained from it. The streets, now eerily quiet, stretched out in every direction, the world feeling both alien and strangely familiar. The world was different. He was different. He could feel the shift inside him, the weight of the princess's challenge bearing down on his shoulders. But there was something else, something gnawing at him, a feeling in his gut that he couldn't ignore. It was a sense that the princess's trials weren't just tests of strength or survival. No, there was more to it than that. And Jason was beginning to suspect that he was being pulled into something far bigger than he had ever imagined. His mind raced. As he looked around, the sky above him was still a swirling shade of purple, its patterns now shifting more erratically. The buildings, once glowing with strange light, now pulsed like living beings, as if they were aware of his presence. Everything felt alive, as if the entire world was watching him, judging him. "You have done well," the princess's voice echoed once again. This time it seemed distant, as though coming from all directions. "But your journey is far from over." Jason's heart skipped a beat. The voice had no warmth, no praise, only the cold, calculated tone of someone who saw him as nothing more than a pawn. And for the first time he began to wonder if the princess was testing him to prove something to herself, or to something much more dangerous than he could imagine. As if on cue, the ground beneath him cracked once more. This time there were no giant creatures to fight, no monsters to slay. Instead, a massive structure began to rise from the earth, a tower, jagged and twisted, its dark edges covered in what appeared to be a strange, shimmering material. It seemed to grow out of the ground like an ancient ruin, reaching toward the sky, towering over everything else. Jason's pulse quickened. This wasn't just another obstacle. This felt different, like the final act of some twisted game. He had to reach the top. But why? And what awaited him at the top? "I will not lie to you, human," the princess's voice returned, now more direct and foreboding. "This is your last trial. You will ascend to the top of the tower. There you will face the truth about me and your future. You will learn what I have been preparing you for." Jason swallowed, his thoughts racing. What truth? What was she trying to teach him? Was this all about survival? Or was there something more? He wasn't sure, but he knew one thing. He had come this far, and there was no turning back. He had to see it through. With a deep breath, Jason began to move toward the tower. As he walked, he could feel the strange energy in the air intensify, almost as if the tower itself was alive, its presence pressing against him like an invisible force.
Each step felt heavier than the last, and the air around him thickened. He was no longer in control of his own body. He was being pushed forward, compelled to keep moving, to keep climbing. As he reached the base of the tower, the entrance loomed before him. The doorway was large, but it wasn't made of stone or metal. It was a swirling portal, its edges constantly shifting in color, like a living thing. The moment Jason stepped forward, the ground beneath him vanished, and he was pulled into the vortex. His stomach lurched as he fell, the sensation of weightlessness surrounding him. He had no control, no way of knowing where he was going or what was happening. But then, just as suddenly as it had started, the sensation stopped. He landed softly, as though the fall had never happened. Jason stood up and looked around. The space he was in was unlike anything he had ever seen, an endless void stretching out in every direction. There was no sky, no ground, just endless dark space. The only light came from a small, floating orb in front of him, its glow flickering like a distant star. And then he saw it. A figure stood in the distance, cloaked in shadow. Jason's heart skipped a beat. The figure was tall, humanoid, but it was not the princess. This was something else, something older. It didn't move, but Jason could feel its presence pressing in on him, like it was studying him, judging him. He took a cautious step forward. "Who are you?" he called out, his voice echoing in the vast.
The final revelation. Jason's heart pounded in his chest as he stood in the endless void, facing the figure that seemed to embody the very essence of mystery and power. Every instinct in him screamed to run, to escape the weight of the questions bearing down on him, but his feet were rooted to the spot. He knew that whatever happened next, there would be no turning back. The figure's eyes, glowing with ancient knowledge, remained fixed on him. Its silent presence filled the space, pressing down on him like the weight of the universe itself. Jason had faced challenges before, but nothing like this. Nothing that felt so personal. "Prove it, human," the voice echoed again, deeper than before, reverberating through the vast emptiness. Jason took a deep breath, trying to steady his racing thoughts. What did that even mean? He had already fought for his life, survived the creature, endured the tests, and still he felt as if he had barely scratched the surface of what was really going on. He glanced around, searching for any clue, anything that might help him understand what he was up against. There was nothing, just the orb, floating in the center, casting its pale glow. The figure seemed to be waiting for something, and Jason realized it wasn't just his physical strength that was being tested. It was his resolve, his mind, his very soul. "Why me?" Jason asked, his voice steady but filled with confusion. "Why am I here? What do you want from me?" The figure remained silent, but Jason could feel its gaze deepening, like it was peering into the very core of his being. Then, without warning, the orb before him flickered violently, its light flashing bright enough for Jason to squint. And then, everything changed. The ground beneath Jason's feet trembled once more, but this time it wasn't the chaotic rumbling of a creature or the shifting of a city. The entire void around him began to ripple, and the orb surged with energy. The air was thick with tension, the silence broken only by the low hum that filled the space. Jason blinked, and suddenly the void was gone. The strange, shifting world he had been in was replaced with a vision, a scene, so vivid and real it felt like he was there. He found himself standing on a battlefield, the smell of smoke and burning debris heavy in the air. There was a war raging, but it wasn't just any war. It was a war between humans and something else, something Jason couldn't quite place. Around him, soldiers clad in strange armor fought against monstrous alien creatures, each more terrifying than the last. Explosions rocked the ground, and the sky was streaked with the fire of burning ships. And there, in the midst of the chaos, stood the princess, Queen Naira, leading her people into battle. Jason's heart sank. The sight of her in the midst of destruction, commanding her army with ruthless precision, was nothing like the calm, composed figure he had seen before.
This was a different side of her, a side that reveled in the power she wielded, in the destruction she brought. The scene shifted again, faster now, pulling Jason through different moments in time, decades of war, devastation, and conquest. He saw the rise of the Arkan Empire, its expansion across countless galaxies, its dominance over entire species. The Queen, with her cold, unfeeling eyes, was at the center of it all. She was the force behind the Empire's rise, the architect of its destruction. But there was something else, something darker. As Jason watched, he saw glimpses of humanity in the images. Small, desperate human resistance forces fighting against overwhelming odds. In the chaos of war, he saw a young woman, a human, but not just any human. She was familiar. Jason's breath caught in his throat as he recognized her. It was her, his mother. The shock hit him like a blow to the chest. He saw her leading a group of rebels fighting to protect their homes, their people. She was courageous, fearless, but she was also desperate. Desperate to survive, desperate to stop the Arkan Empire. Jason's mind raced. His mother had been part of the rebellion. She had fought against the Empire, against Queen Naira. And somehow, Jason was connected to all of this. But how? Before he could make sense of it, the scene shifted once again, and Jason was pulled forward in time. He saw Earth in flames, cities burning, and human survivors fleeing for their lives. The battle was lost. The Arkan Empire had won. And then the vision stopped. Jason was back in the void, the orb now dimming in front of him. He stumbled back, his mind reeling. The weight of what he had seen, of what had been revealed, felt like it might crush him. "You are connected to this war," the figure's voice boomed once again, more powerful than ever. "You are the legacy of those who fought against the Arkan Empire. You carry their blood, their fight, inside of you." Jason's chest tightened. "But why? What does this have to do with me? What am I supposed to do with this information?" The figure did not respond directly. Instead, it pointed again, this time to the fading orb. "The answer lies with her," it said, its voice almost regretful. "The princess, Naira. The choice you make now will determine the fate of your world, of your people. Will you become the hero they need, or will you fail them as others have?" Jason stood there, the weight of the decision pressing down on him. His mind was in turmoil. He had always thought of himself as just a man, a simple human, nothing special. But now he understood. He was part of something far larger than he had ever imagined. The princess's trials were not just a test of strength, but a test of purpose, a test of legacy. And Jason now had to decide what kind of legacy he would leave behind.